guest is someone from the legal industry. So as you might have noticed, I'm giving these mini themes to some of my episodes, like there's fintech focus, and there was startup smartup. So for this one, I came up with legal lessons. It sounded like a good idea because, hey, I couldn't come up with another term starting with L that could resonate with legal the way I wanted. So I thought lessons would do. And so today we're going to learn a few lessons from my friend Mubariz Siddiqui, who is currently working as general counsel at Sarmayacar. And you might have already heard of him. Previously, he had his own startup by the name of Vukla, and he also worked with many other local startups, including, I think his last one was Baikia, after which he joined Sarmayacar. So I'd let him make the rest of his introduction. So please welcome my guest for today, Mubariz Siddiqui. Assalamu alaikum, Mubariz, and welcome to the HQ show. Kaise hain aap?
Assalamu alaikum, Harun. Thank you for having me. Really glad to be here. I would also like to congratulate you on this initiative. I think this is.
Thank you.
I think generally any exercise where we are sharing knowledge and we are working together is good effort. As far as my introduction is concerned, I started practicing law in 2008, so it's been 12 years now. I've worked at law firms, then worked and advised independently investors and startups. Worked at a few as well, like you pointed out. Tried my own hand at startups as well. Here I am with Sarmayacar right now.
So thank you for that introduction. Before we proceed with the questions, the rest of the questions. First question to मेरा आपके लिए ये होगा कि what made you choose not law in general, but startups and VC, and like what made you sort of choose to specialize in this area, in this arena? Because you seem to have been associated with many major startup names, and you seem to have built a reputation around being the lawyer for startups. So what was the inspiration? What were your reasons behind it? Do you mind sharing?
Thank you for that question. Primarily, the way I see it is that Pakistan in its history has never seen a lot of people investing in people. Pakistan in its history has generally seen people investing in assets. Plot le lenge, gaadiyan le lenge, they will go buy, at most they'll buy public listed securities. But venture capital is pure investment in people, because businesses are at such early stage where we are now, the bet is entirely on the founders and how they want to run it. What fascinated me about this space generally globally was that this was unlocking capital for a lot of people who otherwise did not have any access to capital to go ahead and do their businesses. So that bit I found particularly encouraging and interesting. And again, venture capital and generally the space allows you interaction with so many different industries, and everyone in those industries trying to do something disruptive and different, and which I think in terms of learning about industry and business in Pakistan is probably the best accelerator to be a part of. I enjoy that. I enjoy this aspect. I enjoy meeting a lot of people who genuinely want to make change and approach this with that intention. So that's what attracted me to this space.
Interesting. So let's move on to the subject of the primary subject of today's session, which is covering all your bases as a startup founder. Well, I'm sure we won't be able to cover all the bases in just a 1 hour live video session, but at least because many people, when they start their own startup, they might not have any legal background. They might not have anyone around them to provide legal background. And at the very beginning, they might not have the funds required to bring a competent legal counsel on board. I mean, they might be just struggling to make ends meet and survive through their initial launch phase or initial sort of pre-capital phase where they're just bootstrapping and they're just struggling. So if you'd like to provide them with a list of the bare basics, the essentials like when to incorporate, the key factors to consider when writing the agreement with their co-founder, IP protection, when to go for IP registration. So any tips, sort of a to-do list for a startup founder who's bootstrapping and who doesn't have any funds available to hire counsel yet?
No, that's a good question. I see. When you're starting off, what you need to be really careful of is the first thing and the most the biggest. I see the reason for most startups not working, and this is something that I've been repeating on different whenever I get asked this. I think the first thing for startup founders to do is have their internal agreement sorted, right? So if there's a team of 2 or 3, I mean, sole founders is very rarely it's something that we've seen working. But if there are 2 to 3 founders who are looking to build a business together, it's very important for them to have their internal arrangement sorted out. So typically, it would involve the startup founders to agree on each other's roles and responsibilities. It would involve them agreeing on what it is that is important for them as well. There's 2 reasons why startups founder relationships don't work. If one is either they both want different things for the company. Now this is solvable because it's maybe multiple factors. If you want different thing for the company in the sense of the final destination, then that's a bigger problem to solve. If you want a different strategy, i.e. the path to that destination, then that's a different problem to solve. So the idea is that that's this path and strategy problem is easier because you'll always have differences of opinion of how to approach something. But as long as your goal is the same, it's easier. When it comes to the founders wanting the same things for themselves, which is the other big reason, that's a big problem. But because if you have a skill set overlap, if you have a goal overlap, it's very difficult to achieve it for multiple people. So I think it's very important. The first thing that I would recommend founders to cover their base would be to make sure that the arrangement between the founders is okay. Secondly, I would say that the most important thing that they need to be working on or having figured out is the fact that founders are typically starting a business in which they are looking to get external stakeholders involved. Now, by external stakeholders, I mean main two things. You'll have external partners. Partners would include investors, it would include employees, it would include other partners who would just like to partner with you because it's you. On the other hand, we would also have investors, right? And then customers. And the customers, the approach that they have. So whatever the whole purpose of having your governance structures in place, or the whole purpose of your bases being covered, is that your relationships with all these partners and these customers, and of course the biggest partner of them all is the government, who is probably regulating your space, your relationships are managed accordingly. Now again, उसमें भी अगर हम further उसमें जाएं तो relationships हम किस तरह से देखते हैं? Relationships आपकी गवर्नमेंट के साथ भी है, कस्टमर के साथ भी है, एम्प्लॉय के साथ भी है, इन्वेस्टर के साथ भी है. Everyone everyone you deal with is a relationship, and you need to manage it. These relationships, yeah. And now, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit long, but just to take it down. These relationships are recorded in different documents. Your relationship with your employees and investors are in different contracts. Employment contract and your investment contracts, जो SHAs वगैरह बनते हैं. Your relationship with your customers is in your privacy policy, your terms and conditions, जो आपकी website पे होती है. Your relationship with the government that is regulating you is in the law, is in the statute, right? So you need to understand कि मेरी कौन सी relationships है जो मुझे manage करनी. Now coming to a more granular question regarding incorporation, and I would say incorporation is समझने के लिए सबसे पहले एक बहुत important concept है limited legal liability. की बात समझना। लिमिटेड लायबिलिटी का क्या मतलब है? लिमिटेड लायबिलिटी का मतलब है कि मेरी लायबिलिटी और माय ऑब्लिगेशन टुवर्ड्स अ सर्टेन पार्टी इज लिमिटेड टू दिस एक्सटेंट। नाउ हाउ डू आई लिमिट माई लायबिलिटी? जैसे मैंने किसी से करोड़ पे बोरो किया, मुझे उसको करोड़ ही वापस करने होंगे, राइट? नाउ companies, as opposed to partnerships and sole proprietorships, companies are separate legal entities. In the eyes of the law, company is a separate person. It is a separate entity that exists. Now, companies have limited liability. So, as a shareholder, I will own shares in a company, and then the company will owe obligations to everyone. In the event the company cannot pay or fulfill its obligations, me as a shareholder have a limited liability in the company. So, मैंने जो उसमें पैसे लगाए, at most वो डूब सकते हैं. बट अगर मैं एक सोल प्रोप्राइटर हूँ या मैं एक पार्टनरशिप हूँ, तो जो पैसे मेरे अपने हैं और जो मेरे अपने एसेट्स हैं वो नहीं अफेक्ट हो सकते, बट सोल प्रोप्राइटरशिप और पार्टनरशिप में हो सकते. So for example, if I borrow money, if the company borrows money and the company cannot pay, the company will go into liquidation and it'll have to pay out. Partnerships and sole proprietorship, which is not a separate legal entity, if they cannot pay and if their liability exceeds what the business owns, then the partner in question or the sole proprietor in question will have to pay from its personal assets. Sorry, I'm dumping a lot of information really fast, but just to give an overview of this segment.
And I'm sure a lot of my audience would definitely find this information dump, as you called it, quite relevant. सबके लिए इसका completely relevant नहीं, so तो भी इसके चंद parts किसी के लिए relevant होंगे, चंद parts किसी और के लिए relevant होंगे. So thank you for sharing that. And I agree that understanding your liabilities towards everyone that's involved in your business, first and foremost, your agreements with them, your liabilities towards them and their liabilities towards you as well. That's extremely important. So moving on to the investment landscape, ये तो वो चंद basis थी जिन्हें just when you're starting up, you should consider them from the very get-go. Abhi, moving on to the investment landscape, as a part of a venture capital firm, when startups come to you seeking investment, what legal sort of checklists do you see that whether they've, in your assessment, what's the legal checklist that you use to decide whether they're a good fit or not? इसमें सबसे पहले what are the do's that you look for, and then what are, more importantly perhaps, what are the don'ts that you look for?
No, that's a very good question.
And sorry, before you answer, not just you in specific, I'm talking about venture capitalists in general, more so.
No, of course. We also try to not look for anything more than or being extra, go overboard from what general best practices are. But just to give you a better understanding, this is something that it really varies from a business to business, right? अगर आप the best framework to think about it is that whatever liability or risk you have from a legal front, now an investor who will own the same shares in the same company is now coming to share that risk with you. Okay? So what is the risk that investor would not be comfortable, right? And that way what every founder needs to do is put that hat on and think things from a third party's perspective. Yeah, if I'm calling someone in and I'm doing this thing which is exposing me to potential liability, tomorrow any investor could find this out and would be subject to a similar liability, right? And the investment documents, the way they are, the investors make sure that they are covered from all aspects where founders have either misrepresented anything, where the founders have lied about anything or hidden something. Those things would still eventually render the founders liable. So the most important thing to think about is the mindset. The mindset of the founders should be that the share of the company is the asset. Let's not forget, right? It's not whatever the company owns. It's the customers are assets of the company, but individually for the founder and individually for the investor, the shares that they hold in the company are the asset. Now, the value of that share depends on the operations and the governance structures of the company. If the company tomorrow is caught with some fraud, the value of that share will go really down, right? By down, I mean in a private market, nobody wants it. Nobody wants to pay money for it.
Absolutely.
In a public market, everyone's selling. So what you need to think about is how this share can be valuable, how the share can be protected. So, for example, if you are a technology business who is infringing on somebody else's IP, then you the day your infringement gets caught, the company could be sued, and the company would need to be paying money, or at worst, your product would stop working, which would mean that the value of my share would go down, right? So. And it's not just limited to your business commercial things, it's also limited to how you have been making decisions. So if you have been making decisions where money has been just been taken out of the company's account and going into your pocket, and then you reimburse it later, and sometimes don't reimburse it, sometimes reimburse less or forget, those kind of practices are straight down the alley, like the fraud alley. And I would, sometimes people don't do it with bad intention, sometimes people don't do it with the intention of fraud. But what I typically recommend to to founders is to make sure that the company has institutional memory and organizational history, right? Institutional memory कब होती है? Institutional memory तब होती है, एक institution तब बनता है जब आप किसी individual पे rely नहीं कर रहे हो, and it's the whole sum of individuals that more people rely on. So institutional history बनाने के लिए record होना बहुत जरूरी है. So that I know what was the basis of the decision that was being taken then. What is the relationship between the company and partner X? Where would the relationship be covered in a contract which has been thoughtfully done? In that thoughtful contract, you have identified all the things that you expect from them and all the things that they expect from you very clearly. So that tomorrow, if you're not there, somebody else picks it up. They have the whole context in front of them. Whatever obligation the company has, they are very comfortable with and they know it. Similarly, if क्या नाम है आपका, if we have क्या नाम है, what was I was saying, talking about, similarly, if you talk about record of how decisions were being made, that record is in the minutes of your board meetings. It's in how you have communicated the discussions, how that decision came about, what was the knowledge available to the company at that point which led to that decision. Right. So founders who keep record of these things, I would say, are much better suited to avoid any uncomfortable discussion with an investor later on, and much better, and would convey a lot of comfort to any prospective investor who wants to invest in the company, because they know that these guys take a lot of care of the main asset, which is the share that they own, right, and which entirely derives its value entirely from how well the governance structures of the company are.
I agree. And yes, the primary liability of the board members is to maximize the value, maximize the wealth of the shareholders, essentially, which is through maximizing the value of the shares they own. So yes, and a couple of things that you mentioned remind me of something I came across earlier when I was doing my research before incorporating in the US. There was a case with one company, I don't remember the name, where initially when the co-founders formed the company, they had to pay like collectively $100 for the initial share allotment to them. And so one of the founder paid his share of something like $40, the other one who had to pay $60. He didn't categorically pay the company. He sort of adjusted it in his next compensation from the company without having any explicit record that those $60 were adjusted from the company's first compensation to him. So he was like, this is no big deal, it's just $60, and hey, I founded the company. Several years down the line, when the company became successful, it became worth millions of dollars. There were, and through that time, several investors were brought on board as well. So it had multiple stakeholders. The overall slice of the pie of the initial co-founders was much less in percentage, but much larger in size, of course. And then some dispute arose, and things got dirty. And eventually, what happened was, because, like, when things went to court, his opposition had this, they came up with this argument that he doesn't own anything in the company because he didn't pay for his initial equity. And they challenged him to show the proof of him actually buying the initially issued shares, 60% of those shares, and he had nothing to show for it. And he essentially lost what he had built through that as well. So yes, keeping everything documented, keeping perfect track record of every transaction, including what you owe the company, what the company owes you. Ideally, not borrowing from the company at all, but if you absolutely must, then of course having good enough reason for it, keeping all the records for it, it's extremely, extremely important. Let's
Uh,
move.
what
Sorry.
the
Yes.
example that you're giving is, I mean, I'm not familiar of the particular laws and how they affect or this particular case, but even if the ramifications are not that drastic, what happens is that if you don't have things in order, before your next investor comes in or before your first investor comes in, they require things to be in order, right?
Mm.
And if you need the money immediately, that's when you're scrambling to get things done. And what that does is it really, really delays the whole fundraising process. It delays your ability to receive capital early, and it just derails everything. So I
Mm.
would, it's in terms of in terms of input and the benefit received. I would say it's a really little work and input required on your end to receive a lot of to like decrease a lot of pain further down the line. So it's obviously
Absolutely.
worth filling through all the compliance issues.
Absolutely, because you might be at the verge of some crucial stage in your R&D, and or some crucial stage at your go-to-market strategy and go-to-market plan, where you need the funds right then and there. There might be a competitor in the market who's also pushing to launch. You need to launch before them, and because of one irregularity, an investor that you already have on board who wants to invest, because of one irregularity, they might need it fixed before they actually uh, give you the check.
Yeah, you'll
And
end up losing like a month or
yeah,
maybe 3 weeks or 2 weeks of
yeah,
your very crucial time, and
cool.
that's just generally
Yeah,
not something that most people want to do.
absolutely, absolutely agreed. So let's also talk a bit about term sheets. Um, Although we won't really get too much in depth because on this, because that's something that I discuss more uh, with sorry, at times I get really bad with names. Um, Rabil, because I spoke to him earlier today for having an upcoming episode with him as the guest, and he's on board. So sometime in late August, in one of the episodes for August, that's when I would really get like to get uh, sort of in depth into term sheets and things from purely from an investor's perspective rather than from a lawyer's perspective. But if you want to give an overview of um, how a startup founder can be legally prepared um, in terms of like when it comes to term sheets, what are the signs that it's a good investor that might be a good match? What are the signs that it's something that even if they are being offered good money, they should run away because the legal ramifications might not really be great for the startup? So what to look for and what to avoid in terms of the legal points on the term sheet?
No, that's a good question, and I'm sure Rabil will be able to add a lot of good color on this subject, and I would definitely recommend tuning in on that one. But from a legal perspective, I would say. Understand, take some time out, and this is what I'm seeing with a lot of founders, where they just don't understand. they don't take the time out to understand either, right? And it's okay to rely on lawyers and it's okay to rely on other things, but I don't want you to take a whole legal crash course into everything related to venture financing. You can learn that, but please understand very well uh, how the economics will work and how the control will work, right? So that there's no shock at the end, or there's no misalignment of expectations. Now, when it comes to economics, what is it that you need to understand? You need to understand two very simple things. How much money are you going to get, right? Net.
Mhm.
And how much money, how much money is the company going to raise and how much equity they will give away. This can be a typical, typically difficult in terms of just, or can be confusing when you just talk about post money, pre money, different jargon used to just communicate one simple aspect. Um, so I would say just take some time out to clarify that aspect. The other thing you need to clarify is you need to understand how dilution will work and how your shares will be diluted. Safe notes, people really love safes and convertibles, and obviously there's a clear intrinsic benefit to that transaction construct. But a lot of people don't understand how the dilution will work. A lot of people don't understand the difference between a pre-money and post-money safe, and whether the cap is pre-money or the cap is post-money, and and when will the discount kick in, and how would the all the safe conversion or dilution affect their own share. So please, please, please take some time out to understand before raising a round how the dilution would work, and how what stake would you end up with at the end, and what the value would at stake be. Number one. Number two, with regards to control, I think it's very important to see how what things or what aspects would you now need a permission of the investor for, right? But I specifically use the word permission because that's kind of what it is. Obviously, no investor, obviously, no, I'm not going to say no investor, I'm saying no institutional investor or someone who's out there to make a reputation as an investor and to do this for a living would want to be unreasonable, because reputation stick with you and your reputation is what gives you that advantage. But what's important is that the founders understand how what aspects of the business they'll be losing control over, and how will the day to day routine or day to day decision making get affected. So that's a very important thing to consider. Uh, Before investors come in, it's a good fit is where you don't have to open up the legal document. Let me be very
Mm.
honest, right? A good fit means that you have now decided, and all the issues that you guys encounter are done mutually anyway. Whenever you can mutually discuss and agree, and where this disagreement, and it's bound to be. To be honest, if there's no disagreement, then get worried, because then you have someone who's an echo chamber. What you need is someone who would disagree with you, and disagree with you constructively to add value to your business. Anyway, so whenever you feel there is disagreement, it's the nature of your interaction, of how you're resolving that disagreement, and whether in the process the investor is adding any particular value to your business. That's more important. And what I would that's the thing that I would recommend what the founders should look for, because the rest, besides the economics, which you should know very clearly, and how things will work. Uh, Again, one more thing in economics is tranches. Uh, One or two tranches are fine, three tranches are fine for investment. But I've seen in local angel investments where investors are insisting on six tranches, seven tranches, 3 साल में हर 2 महीने बाद आके ले जाना पैसे. You don't want to be doing that, right? And the company is also losing out simply time value of money. I mean, you could have had that capital earlier, and maybe deployed it more effectively earlier, maybe used it more efficiently earlier, as opposed to leaving it with the investor. But obviously, every case is different. Every circumstance is different. Check size is different. The company situation is different. But generally, try to stick to less tranches than more. So it would be less friction as well.
For the unacquainted, can you please elaborate on tranches, because many who are
Tranches,
not familiar.
sure,
Pardon?
sorry. Tranche is an installment. So, for example, if I'm supposed to give you $1 million in investment, and I'm saying I'll give it to you in 10 installments over 10 years, that means every year I'll go and take the $100,000 from
Mhm.
you. Uh, I would recommend trying to keeping it to at most 1 or 2 years. and not extending that period too far. But best is if you can receive most of it up front. Obviously, there are multiple considerations. Sometimes the next tranche slash installment, now sometimes that is contingent upon certain things because your
Mhm.
business nature is such and the investor is not comfortable, and that's also fine. Uh, the point is, whatever you agree on commercially, it can be legally recorded, but it's important for you to be commercially very sure that the terms that you're agreeing on are good for your business and would not significantly like impact your or derail the process.
Absolutely. And every business is going to have very unique requirements in that regard. So there's no one size fit all. At least every specific niche would have a very unique set of requirements.
Welcome.
Um, Another question that was on my mind, let me quickly try to recall it before we start taking questions from the audience. Um,
I mean, we
what
can,
was it?
if you want, we can start the questions, and you can obviously add in your questions
Of
as well.
course,
That's
of
not an
course.
issue. And any
Yes.
other.
Absolutely. So, everyone who's tuned in, I would love for you to start asking your questions now because Mubariz is going to be sharing his answers live with you. If you're listening to this after the fact when the live broadcast has ended, you can still shoot your questions my way, and I'd be more than happy to share them with Mubariz. But if you're online right now, now is the time to ask your questions. And in the meantime, I'll think of that question that completely slipped my mind.
That's okay. I mean, one other thing that till then I would also like to touch upon is generally how the again coming back to the investor relationship is generally uh, the mindset through which or the mindset that you need to have when you're looking to raise capital, right? And whenever you're looking to raise capital, which is other people money, PM as people call it. It should be to achieve a certain purpose, right? A specific goal. And when you are genuine in your intent to achieve that goal, it gets reflected. It gets reflected in the past actions that you've taken, how you have been performing with your business. It gets reflected in the interaction that you're having with the current investor. Uh, and the second advice would be on a more granular level would be around the value that is beyond the gap. If you
Mhm.
ever restrict yourself to just having to raise money for the sake of cash, you will find it very hard to get the right investors, right? And the right investors also need to be rewarded. One thing that I heard reading somewhere, listening to someone was around you get what you reward very simply, right?
Absolutely.
If you reward a certain behavior, that's what you will get. If you reward a certain kind of activity, that's what you will get. So if you will get what you reward, then if you want investors who you want to put in that extra effort for you, who would go beyond capital and work for you, who will add additional value to your business, then you will have to reward them with those their considerations as well. And always be
Absolutely.
open to that because don't think of it as, oh, Silicon Valley has this benchmark, oh, Falana has this benchmark, etc. It's about getting the right partners on board. When you're hiring an employee, you're looking to hire an employee, or when you're even looking to use tech from a certain partner, if use a third-party service, you look at the value that they're providing, and some parties will provide more value than others. That's what would make those certain parties more expensive than others as well, and that reflects in the value that they add. So don't shy away from those things. Think of it as you negotiating and structuring a partnership. uh, don't think of it as a one standard fit all. You went to a market and you collected four investors, because
Mhm.
that's not how it works. It's not going to be standard. Each deal or each investor has their own considerations which you would need to meet. Once we have 500 VCs in or 500 different investors in Pakistan alone, at that point, maybe 10, 20 of them are very similar. At that point, maybe you can just choose them on standard basis. But right now,
Mhm.
Pakistan is not that market. Pakistan has
Absolutely.
very few of them and investors, and all investors have different considerations because the way they are structured and because what their LPs or their investors expect from them. So I would recommend whenever you're talking to an investor, take out the time to understand what their considerations are, and then also approach it with the partnership mindset where you're trying to partner with someone and you're trying to get them on board, and you convey the flexible posture, or enough flexibility around what you consider to be important, valuable partnership. So, and in that messaging, it's very important to convey willingness, and it's very important to convey the importance you will be attaching to the investor.
Absolutely. And yes, on this note, yes, I agree. It's more it makes more business sense to, let's say, get an investor who's giving you let's say 10 million for 15% equity, compared to someone who might be willing to give you 10 million for 10% equity, but who might not bring any value other than that equity to other than that investment to the table. The one who's asking for 15% might appoint advisors on your board who may be able to accelerate your growth in a very substantial manner. They might have industry connections to significantly impact your go-to-market strategy, maybe accelerate your go-to-market strategy significantly. So against that 15%, you're giving more equity, but like you're being left with a lesser percentage of the pie, but the pie is growing bigger sooner, and the chances of the pie actually growing bigger, your 85% might be far more valuable than your 90% if you were to go with the other investor who isn't contributing anything but the cash alone, since
Yeah.
you can't do everything. So having some people on board who can at least take some of the burden off you for doing things that otherwise you might have to do all by yourself as the founder or founders, so much the better. So yes, that's important.
No,
Now
no,
that brings. Sorry, yeah, sorry.
of course.
Please go ahead.
I think that's a pretty important point that you raised. That extra 5%, whether it's 85 or 90%, of course, right? It's very important for you or for most founders to be clear about what is the value that the investor can add, right? क्या कर लेंगे इसका? And this is something that generally in the valley is something that being made fun of as well, and being made like what can VCs even do besides just giving capital? Uh, there's a lot of things, right? And that's those things people can't deny, and that's why people do prefer to go to certain firms as opposed to certain other firms globally. Look at it, Sequoia and A16Z, they will probably just be on top of most deals as the other. But there will be certain for funds that would be more focused on certain areas, and that would attract those kind of founders. Or maybe because a partner at a certain firm fund has that expertise, and you're just attracted to that partner. So say for example at Greylog, if you read Hoffman because you want to build a next social media platform of some sorts, and he understands that really well. Just an example from my head. The point is. It will be different for each startup. It will be different for each founder. It also it's about that equation that you will have, because you're getting an ally on board, and this ally is now owns the same equity as you do, and both are looking for the same return on the same asset. And what you need to do is you need to have people who will, number one, challenge you. Will not be an echo chamber. Will not just but they will challenge you constructively. Part of the challenge network, they will ask you difficult questions. They will make sure that you don't go ahead and destroy your own business or defeat your own objectives. Other than that, what investors can really do is really be a good sounding board, which helps you make decisions, where they ask you the right questions because of their own expertise about just industry and business, where they can just ask you about questions which will help you think. No investor thinks they can do your business better than you. Otherwise, they would not invest
They
money
will
to do
invest.
yeah,
Yes,
to take a small part. They'll just go and do it themselves, right? The reason why
exactly.
is because they're backing your ability to go and do it. Uh, but what everyone knows is no one person on their own can do everything, and you need a team around you. And think of your investors as your team members. uh, the people who have put in money and you have given them equity. And it's about getting the right. You will, whenever you're trying to hire someone, say trying to hire a business development lead, there will be a guy who will be asking, or a girl who will be asking for 150,000. There'll be someone who will be asking for 100,000. There'll be someone who will be okay for 70,000. It'll depend, and it'll always be about that difference. Sometimes you can get better value out of the person who is asking for 70,000 because of the nature of that person. But sometimes it's the person who's asking for a premium because they know their worth. Number one, and number two, they will actually deliver. So, in terms of investors, certain investors have a very hands-off approach, and that's the funds approach. The funds approach is that we will make, say, 100 investments. There's no way that that fund can focus on those 100 investments, all of them, right?
Yes.
But they can pick up your call, they can help you connect. So think of YC. YC has so many startups, but they have office hours, they have done the startup program, other things that we've helped. Smaller funds, so a fund like Sarmayacar has a very heavy touch approach, right? We like to get involved and we like to support from helping you recruit to helping you find partners to helping you grow, and in any way we can, to of course being the sounding board and the standard stuff that any board member does. And that is reflected in the investments we make. We would never want to go to someone or invest in someone who just is looking at us as an ATM machine where you just take cash. Not interested. We're interested in situations where our skill set and the value we bring is actually something that's considered important by the founders. So again, coming back to that, so it's about expectation alignment, and it's about what you need to be really thinking of when you're trying raising money from an institutional VC or even an angel.
I agree. And yeah, now I recalled that other question that I was previously unable to remember. So there have been incidences in the industry. I don't even recall names right now, so I wouldn't name names. But where investors and some, yes, now I do recall names, but right now I'm not going to name names. Where investors have taken ideas, they've just used startup founders as their sort of idea recruitment board, and then just gone ahead with the ideas pitched to them, not invested in those companies, and just built whatever ideas they had come up with that they found good enough. So as a startup founder, when you're going to an investor with your, not just your idea, you have something, you're already building it, because ideas are a dime a dozen, and they're practically worthless till someone has actually put in some effort behind them to take them to even a little beyond the idea stage. But just at the idea stage, they're worth nothing. So yeah, there have been instances in our industry and elsewhere as well, where in the guise of investment, in the guise of showing interest as an investor, they've used startups for basically recruiting ideas, and then implemented them in their own groups of companies, and set up one startup or the other using their own in-house resources or hired resources to build that, and then gone to market because they simply had the resources to do it faster than those founders who came to them with the idea or with the startup. So what sort of legal steps should a startup founder take to protect their own idea or its implementation that they've done so far before they approach an investor in a landscape where this risk is pretty real?
Okay, so two things around this, right? If you are going to an institutional investor who's building a reputation as an investor, trying to attract, they would not do this because
Yes, of course.
obviously, if they're interested in building companies, they can just go build companies, right? An investor is someone, an institutional investor especially, is someone who has convinced other people to give him the money to invest in startups. So they act as actually literally the platform
Yes.
between those investors, the thing, but for governance and other reasons, and even decisions. My point is, it's impossible for them to go ahead and do this on their own because they are fully committed to this one.
Oh, yes.
When it comes to angels, it's possible and it's something that can happen. But again, uh, you meet people with warm introductions, you meet people whose references check out, and you can talk to them about your general business model, your general idea. But anything proprietary or anything that you feel is knowledge that could enable even a third part that is unique to you, and it could enable a third party who could maybe gain that first mover advantage before you. Because
Yes.
one thing that you have to remember is that once you launch the business, then it's in the public, right? Then your
Oh,
whole
yes.
idea is there for everyone to see. Anyone can
Yes.
copy it. No one can, like, kya karenge aap log? Like when Uber started, several Ubers started. So
Absolutely.
and there are certain good examples of it. They ended up acquiring a few of them, right? The point is, it's not about the idea; it's about the execution.
The
So
execution.
if there is something proprietary about the way you are going to execute the business and the way you are going to gain the first mover advantage in the market, it's something that I would say share with people who you trust will not be dishonest with that confidential information. But generally, I'm very skeptical about whether there could be any information that could allow anybody else to outdo you. Right? I'm not saying go announce it in the public. All I'm
Yeah.
saying is sharing it with smart people it usually leads to a very good feedback loop as well, where you know what you're thinking, whether this is on the right lines or not, and whether this is something that can that that can be replicated. My point is, it's. I don't see this as a material threat. A lot of this founders want to sign NDAs with VCs, and VCs specifically don't like to sign NDAs, and the reason for that is very simple. Uh, you might for this like your startup is your world, but in our world there are many people operating in these industries in many different ways. We don't want to be bound by this NDA because if we decide to invest in somebody else who is operating in your industry, anyone can make the case, oh, you took my confidential information,
Mhm.
etc. This is something that VCs generally all across the globe don't want to be bound by. Of course,
Mhm.
when we are entering into a much deeper discussion or say progressing the matter, then sure, uh, then we can look into it. But other than that, it's not. So don't be if your idea is something that can be easily copied and you can be bulldozed out. That'll happen to you once you launch anyway. And if you don't have the execution capability to fight off competition, it can happen to you regardless.
Mhm. But there have been cases where the idea was a very viable business idea, and um, the founders basically disclosed everything to the investors because they were shown promises of getting their idea funded, and then the investors, instead of funding them due to one reason or the other, they chose to execute that exact idea themselves. Like, I'm not going to name names, but I know of a couple of them as well. So in that case, would something like IP protection, filing for the intellectual property rights for that idea, or not just the idea, whatever they're building at that stage, before taking it to investors in the first place, would that help, or and any other steps that you think might be
No,
relevant in such a
so
scenario?
you can't register an idea, right?
Of
I
course,
mean, again,
not an idea, not
what
an
about
idea. Those startups weren't in idea stage. They had something, but they just didn't have. They just weren't in a position to take it to market yet. They were working on it. They were building upon it when it happened.
so again, let's come back to the basics, right? Are you building something that is proprietary, that has
Mhm.
never been built before, that no one in
Yes.
the world has ever thought of, and you have somehow built it, and you can then go and get a patent on it. You can then go and protect it intellectually so that nobody else can copy it, nobody else can use it, etc. Sure. Uh, Even most people when they do something proprietary they don't go and patent it because sometimes those things are just incapable of being replicated because of the sophistication they have, right? But sometimes people go get it patented because it can be replicated and because this one person has found a new industrial use case for it, etc.
Mhm.
It really depends, right? Without names, without knowing the specifics, I can't comment on the generality of it all, but the principle that I would keep in mind is if after I launched it the person could have replicated it then without this being a breach of any liability. So, for example, Coca-Cola launches and someone starts Pepsi, which is
Hmm.
similar brown fizzy drink, right?
Yeah.
Which tastes a certain way without stealing anything from Coke, without stealing their IP or anything, their secret formula and all. The secret formula should be just kept secret. Like, if someone can reverse engineer it, they can reverse engineer it anyway.
Yeah.
So now, if if someone if someone can take that and replicate that business after I launch anyway, uh, there was no IP as such to begin. Of
Hmm.
course, I'm just saying a general principle. Every situation could be different, etc.
Hmm.
So if in this case you haven't launched and somebody else beats you to the market, even though you are in advanced stages where you have done some work on the product now, and someone still comes and beats you to the market, and this is that person who could have beaten you even after you have launched and come in, most likely they would have taken the market because they can execute better. Right now,
Hmm.
if it's payments app, if it's whatever, because they came in first with payment, no, and let's remember one thing, and let's be very honest and humble about this one aspect that uh, most ideas that come to us, or maybe 99.9999% ideas out there, have all been thought about, right? Have all been
Yes.
thought about at some point by someone.
By
And
someone.
there's no such thing as no. People execute and implement things in new and novel ways, and that's respectable. That's okay. But ideas तो बहुत सारे होते हैं. So my advice to those founders would be कि, be good enough to out execute anyone, because if you're not, even if the people you haven't spoken to not, tomorrow the minute a competitor or potential competitor sees your product and they feel that they can replicate and execute better than you, they will do it.
They will do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing, and let's see if we have any questions across the platforms where we're live right now.
I also have a bit of a hard stop at 7. I have to I thought it was 6 to 7, so I also
Oh,
kept
okay.
that in mind. But we can go like 4 5 minutes overboard. That's fine.
All right. That's not an issue because I don't think we have any questions so far. I think you must have elaborated on everything uh, in a way that didn't really leave room for many questions, which would be a great thing. So yeah, we do have a whole bunch of people tuned in, but no questions so far. So, hey, everyone, this is your chance. We have 5 minutes with Mubariz. If you have any questions, please ask right away. If you're listening to this later, after the show, shoot them my way and I'll share them with Mubariz. So, yes, now's your chance. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. So I think, yes, we can uh, yeah, we can call it a wrap for now. So thank you very much, Mubariz, for joining me. If you have any parting words that you'd like to share with the audience, please feel free.
Sure. No, thank you very much, Harun, for having me. Always happy to share whatever learnings that I've been able to get in my journey. And feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out with specific questions that you might have that I can help you with. I would be very happy to guide you through any issues that you might have, as much as I can, as much as my time would permit. But always happy to engage and help people out. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Back to the office.
So that was Mubariz, and I hope you enjoyed the session and you learned something of value from it. Um, I also have a couple of announcements to make regarding the show. Um, so my idea initially was to just start and then go and then see how it goes and this just basically wing it. But I'm thinking of sort of refining the format and having a sort of a schedule for the topics that we cover. So I'm looking for any suggestions, any feedback that you might have based on the 4 shows so far. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Where do you want me to focus? What areas do you want me to improve on? What sort of guests would you like me to bring more often? Which particular guests would you like to see on the show? Please let me know. And so over the next month or so, I'm going to be working on improving the format in general. And I'm also looking at maybe bringing in multiple field experts on a single show rather than the current format of one guest per show. But that might happen maybe a couple of 3 months down the line. Another thing I'd like to know if you would like any solo episode from me. Let's say some week I don't have any guest available because, hey, I'm not that, we're not that popular yet that we've got guests lined up to be featured on the show. So for the weeks where I might not have guests available, if you want me to cover any specific topic on my own in a solo show, I'd love to hear from you what you'd like to hear from me. And one more thing that I need help from you about is, one more thing that I would like to know from your end would be, what was it? It just slipped my mind. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I've completely gone blank on that. Yeah, one more thing that I'd actually like you to do is, so I've got a bit of an audience on Facebook already. I've got some audience coming in on Twitter, but so far YouTube has been like the challenge for me, because I think most of my audience is on Facebook. They don't tune in on YouTube. So if you can, from the next show onward, if you can, instead of tuning in on Facebook, if you could tune in on YouTube, I'll really appreciate that, because I would like to sort of over the next couple of months or so get my I'm good with the number of subscribers there, but the number of watch hours there is rather dismal. And on Facebook, I'm getting pretty respectable watch hours. So I would like to sort of distribute it across both mediums. So yeah, I would really appreciate if you would tune in on YouTube as the preferred medium compared to Facebook. And one more thing, the website. So I launched the website with the last show, and there are some improvements that I've been making over the past week that you're going to see live before next week's show. Some dynamic features so that when a show is live and you land on the homepage, there's an indication that we're live right now, and better organized events for upcoming shows, and better organized views for past shows, more of a structural approach towards guests, episodes, and events. So you're going to start seeing those changes on the site, and you can just watch the shows on the site as well anytime, because any live show would be streamed live on the homepage and in the episodes area, and any past shows archives would be available there for watching later as well. And those would be YouTube embed links. So yeah, so that's it for now, I guess. And so far it's been pretty informal. Going forward, I might sort of formalize the format, have less of casual banter from me at the end. So yeah, let's explore and let's see where we end up. Thank you again for tuning in. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.